In 1968, the quiet city of Newcastle, England, woke up to a nightmare that nobody could explain. Two small children were found dead within weeks of each other. The community searched for a killer, a stranger, a drifter, maybe even a maniac hiding in the shadows. But when the truth came out, it horrified the world. The person responsible wasn't a man at all. It was a little girl just 11 years old. Her name was Mary Bell. Mary Flora Bell was born on May 26, 1957, in Scotswood, a rough, working-class area of Newcastle upon Tyne. Scotswood in the 1950s was an industrial neighborhood filled with narrow streets, run-down homes and families struggling to get by. But even in that harsh environment, Mary's childhood was darker than most. Her mother, Betty Bell, was only 16 when she gave birth to her. Betty worked as a sex worker and often left for days or weeks, traveling to Glasgow and London for clients. From the moment Mary was born, she was unwanted. There were reports that Betty had even tried to give her away, once to a woman who had lost her own baby. According to people who knew them, Betty was cruel and unpredictable. She was said to have tried to smother Mary more than once, laughing afterward as if it were a joke. Mary's father, Billy Bell, was no better. He was a petty criminal who was often in and out of jail. Some people claimed he wasn't even Mary's real father. Between her mother's violence and her father's absence, Mary grew up in an atmosphere of fear, confusion, and pain. Neighbors would later remember hearing screams and shouting coming from their home. Mary was often seen with bruises and cuts, but her mother always had an excuse. She said Mary was clumsy, that she'd fallen down the stairs or hurt herself while playing. But people began to notice that Mary seemed detached from the other kids. She was quiet, distant, and when she did speak, there was something cold in her tone. Even as a child, Mary showed disturbing behavior. She would twist the heads off dolls, hurt animals, and once tried to choke another girl just to see how she would react. Teachers described her as bright but disruptive. Other children avoided her. One classmate said that when Mary stared at you, you felt like something bad was going to happen. By age 10, Mary was already a child no one quite understood. Her emotions didn't seem normal. She could smile one moment and become furious the next. She seemed fascinated by pain, both hers and others. Her mother's abuse had turned her cold, but something deeper was forming inside her, a dark curiosity about death. On May 25, 1968, just one day before her 11th birthday, that darkness crossed a line. That afternoon, 4-year-old Martin Brown was playing in his neighborhood in Scotswood. He was a cheerful little boy, well-liked by everyone. Around 3:30 p.m., he was seen walking near an old, abandoned house on St. Margaret's Road, a building the local kids used as a playground. A few hours later, Martin was found dead inside that house. There were no visible injuries. His body was lying on the floor, his lips were slightly blue, and a small amount of blood trickled from his mouth. The police arrived quickly but couldn't find any signs of struggle or evidence of foul play. They assumed it was an accident. Maybe he'd swallowed something or fallen from a ledge. The community was heartbroken, but nobody suspected murder. The next day, something strange happened. Mary Bell showed up at Martin's home. His mother, still in shock, opened the door to see the small girl from the neighborhood standing there. Mary looked at her and asked, "Do you miss Martin?" When the grieving woman said yes, of course she did, Mary stared for a moment and then asked, "Do you miss him enough to cry?" She followed with a chilling question, "Do you think he's gone to heaven?" Then she smiled and walked away. It was a moment that haunted Martin's mother for years. 2 days later, a local nursery school was broken into. The inside was trashed, toys smashed, papers thrown everywhere, and handwritten notes left behind. When police arrived, they found something disturbing scrawled in childish handwriting. One note said, "We did murder Martin Brown." Another read, "I murder so that I may come back." The police laughed it off as a prank. They thought it was the work of kids who'd heard about the accident and wanted attention. No one believed it was real. But it was real. It was Mary's warning. Over the next several weeks, Mary continued to talk about Martin's death. She bragged to other children that she knew what happened. She even said she was there when it happened. Her best friend, 13-year-old Norma Bell, no relation, often joined in her strange games. Together they acted out scenes of choking and dying, giggling as they did it. Nobody took them seriously. Then, 2 months later, it happened again. On July 31, 1968, 3-year-old Brian Howe disappeared while playing near his home in Scotswood. He was last seen with Mary and Norma. When he didn't come home for tea, his family began to panic. A search began that lasted into the evening. Just after 8 p.m., a policeman searching near a railway yard found Brian's body lying between piles of rubble. He had been strangled. This time there were clear signs of violence. Clumps of his hair had been cut off, small puncture wounds dotted his legs, and someone had carved the letter M into his stomach with a razor or scissors. The sight was horrifying and impossible to understand. Who could do this to a 3-year-old? The police immediately knew it was murder. They sealed off the area and began questioning everyone in Scotswood. They interviewed neighbors, parents, teenagers, and eventually the children who played nearby. That's when Mary made her first mistake. When asked if she'd seen anything, Mary calmly said she'd seen Brian with another boy earlier that day, a boy who had been carrying a pair of scissors. The officers were taken aback. That detail, the scissors, had not been made public. Only the killer would know about it. That one sentence changed everything. Detectives began to look closer at Mary Bell. They noticed how calm she was, how almost proud she seemed when talking about the case. She didn't cry or show fear. Instead she smiled. It was the same strange, cold smile that had unsettled her teachers and classmates before. Soon after, police also began to hear rumors from other children. Some said Mary and Norma had been acting strange, even laughing near the area where Brian's body was found. One boy claimed Mary had told him outright that she had killed a boy. When investigators brought the girls in for questioning, their stories didn't match. Norma cried, panicked, and finally told the police that Mary was the one who killed Brian Howe. She said Mary had strangled him, then gone back later with scissors to mutilate the body. Norma insisted she tried to stop her, but Mary had threatened her. Mary, however, showed no emotion. She denied everything and tried to shift the blame onto Norma. But the police noticed something. Mary kept smiling. When detectives mentioned Brian's injuries, she said, "That's naughty, isn't it?" and laughed. Eventually, evidence tied both girls to the crime scene. Fibers from their clothes matched fibers found on Brian's body. Fingerprints and other traces confirmed they had been there. On August 5, 1968, Mary Bell and Norma Bell were officially charged with the murders of Martin Brown and Brian Howe. The press swarmed Newcastle. The story of an 11-year-old killer spread around the world. The headlines were brutal. Little girl of death. The monster child. The devil with a baby face. People were terrified and fascinated at the same time. How could a child be capable of such evil? What kind of family could produce something like this? Mary was sent to a secure facility while waiting for trial. Even there she stood out. Staff described her as intelligent but manipulative. She would swing from polite and quiet to sudden bursts of anger. She would threaten other children, then smile sweetly afterward. One worker wrote that her eyes looked dead, as if nothing inside her ever truly felt. Psychiatrists who examined her were divided. Some thought she was suffering from deep trauma caused by years of abuse. Others believed she was born with a dangerous lack of empathy, a child psychopath. Her behavior showed no remorse, only curiosity. It was as if she wanted to see what death looked like, what power over life felt like. In the months before her trial, more disturbing stories came out about her childhood. Her mother, Betty, had allegedly forced her to watch sexual acts with clients. Some even claimed Betty encouraged men to abuse Mary. The constant violence, confusion, and emotional neglect had destroyed her sense of right and wrong. But even with that background, what Mary did could not be explained away. Psychologists would later say that while many abused children suffer deeply, very few become killers. Something about Mary's mind processed pain differently. She didn't just survive abuse, she absorbed it and turned it outward. The trial that followed would shock Britain. People expected to see a disturbed woman or a hardened criminal. Instead, they saw a small girl sitting in the courtroom, her legs barely touching the floor, staring blankly ahead. Mary Bell was about to become one of the youngest convicted killers in British history. The quiet neighborhood of Scotswood would never be the same again. The children who once played freely in the streets were suddenly afraid. Parents kept their kids close. And the name Mary Bell would echo in whispers for decades. The child who murdered without reason. She wasn't the stranger in the dark or the monster in the alley. She was a little girl who lived just down the street, who smiled, played, and killed. The question that would haunt everyone who heard her story was simple. Was Mary Bell born a monster, or was she made into one? By the time Mary Bell's trial began, the whole of Britain was watching. The story of an 11-year-old girl accused of strangling two small boys had horrified the country. Reporters from all over Europe crowded into the courthouse. Parents kept their children indoors. Everyone wanted to know how a child could commit such crimes, and what kind of justice could even apply to someone so young. The trial opened at the Newcastle Assizes in December 1968. Mary was only 11 years old, sitting so small in the courtroom that her feet barely touched the floor. She wore a neat blue dress and a white bow in her hair. She looked innocent, too young, too fragile to have done the things she was accused of. Yet the eyes that met the courtroom were cold and distant. Her co-defendant, 13-year-old Norma Bell, sat beside her. Though they shared a last name, the two were not related. Norma looked terrified, often crying during the hearings. Mary, however, stayed composed, almost expressionless. The charges were shocking. Both girls were accused of murdering 4-year-old Martin Brown and 3-year-old Brian Howe, and of causing willful damage by vandalizing the nursery school where they had left those haunting notes. The prosecution painted Mary as the leader and Norma as her follower. The evidence was clear. Fibers, fingerprints, and witness statements placed them both at the scene of the crimes. The notes from the nursery linked directly to them, childish handwriting filled with words no child should write.